Hey Reddit, I really need some advice. I'm 29F, and my partner Mark 30M. And I just welcomed our daughter, Lily, 2 weeks ago. She's perfect, healthy, and the absolute joy of our lives. But getting to this point has been a total roller coaster, and a lot of the drama comes down to two really difficult moms. My ex-mother-in-law and Mark's mom. To give you some context, I was married before, very briefly. I met my ex-husband, David, 31M, when I was 22. We were young, impulsive, and thought we were head over heels in love. We got married after dating for about 8 months, but it was pretty much a disaster from the start. We were just completely wrong for each other. We fought about everything, from silly stuff like how to load the dishwasher to big things like our future plans. He wanted to settle down in our small hometown, buy a house, and start having kids right away. I wanted to focus on my career and maybe think about kids later. We were married for just over a year before we both realized it wasn't working. There wasn't any huge fight or cheating. It was more like we slowly figured out we were making each other miserable. We decided to get divorced, and it was actually pretty civil. We didn't hate each other. We just knew we'd be better off apart. Since we didn't have any shared property or kids, the whole process was pretty straightforward. My parents were supportive. They'd never been big fans of David. They thought he was kind of boring, honestly, and they just wanted me to be happy. But David's mom, Susan, was a whole different story. She's the type of person who has her life completely mapped out and expects everyone else to follow her plan, whether they want to or not. She's also very religious and believes divorce is a sin, no matter what. Susan had this idea of David and me as the perfect traditional couple, and she was crushed when we split up. She tried everything to get us back together. Guilt trips, crying phone calls, even showing up at my apartment unannounced with a marriage counselor. It was super awkward and uncomfortable. I tried to be polite but firm, telling her I appreciated her concern, but the decision was final. The divorce was finalized about 7 years ago. I moved to a new city, landed a great job, and basically started over. I stopped talking to David and Susan, not out of anger, but because I needed to move on. We weren't connected on social media, and we didn't have any mutual friends, so it was a clean break. Then, about a year and a half ago, I met Mark. We were at a work conference, and we started talking during a coffee break. We just clicked right away. He was funny, smart, kind, and shared my love for travel and adventure. We exchanged numbers and started dating soon after. I was upfront with Mark about my past marriage from the beginning. I told him the whole story on our second date, and it didn't bother him at all. He said it was in the past and didn't change how he felt about me. He'd been in a few serious relationships too, so he understood that sometimes things just don't work out. Our relationship felt completely different from what I had with David. With Mark, everything felt easy, natural, and exciting. We had so much in common and just genuinely enjoyed being together. About 6 months in, I met Mark's parents. His dad, John, was the sweetest, most easygoing guy ever. He made me feel like part of the family right away. But Mark's mom, Carol, was a whole different story. Carol is complicated. She's very polished, proper, and has strong opinions. She's also extremely attached to Mark, who's her only child. From the moment I met her, I could tell she was judging me and finding me lacking. She was polite, but there was definitely a cold vibe. She made a few subtle comments about my divorce. Nothing outright rude, but things like, "Oh, you've been married before? That's interesting." Or, "I've always believed marriage is forever, no matter what." She also made it clear that she expected Mark to settle down and have a traditional family, just like Susan had wanted for David. I tried not to let it bother me too much. I thought maybe she was just being overprotective of her son, and I hoped she'd eventually come around and like me. But that never really happened. She was always polite, but it never felt like she was truly friendly. She'd ask me about my job and family, but it always felt more like she was grilling me than having a real conversation. Then, about 8 months ago, I found out I was pregnant. It was unexpected, but we were happy about it. Mark and I had talked about having kids someday, but we weren't actively planning for it yet. Still, we were both excited. We decided not to rush into getting married right away. I'd been through one quick wedding before, and I didn't want to do that again. I wanted to make sure we were getting married because we really wanted to, not just because of the baby. Mark totally understood and supported me on that. When we told our families, my parents were over the moon. They'd been wanting grandkids for a while. John, Mark's dad, was just as excited. He started talking about building a treehouse and teaching the baby how to fish. Carol, though, wasn't happy, no surprise there. She didn't say anything outright mean, but you could tell she didn't approve. She kept making comments like, Well, I guess this isn't the traditional way to do things. And I just hope you're ready for how hard parenting can be. She also started dropping strong hints that we should get married before the baby was born. The pregnancy itself went pretty smoothly. I had some morning sickness early on, but overall I felt good. Mark was amazing. He came to all my doctor's appointments, read baby books, and even started learning how to cook, which was a big deal for him. But Carol kept stressing me out. She'd call me regularly, saying she was checking in, but it always turned into a lecture. She'd tell me what to eat, how much to exercise, and what parenting books I should read. She even sent me a list of approved baby names, all of which were super old-fashioned and boring. I tried to stay calm and understanding. I knew Carol was trying to help in her own way, but it was draining. I felt like I was always being judged or criticized. Then, about a month before my due date, something totally unexpected happened. I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It said, "Is this OP? Susan, David's mom. We need to talk. It's about the baby." My heart sank. I hadn't talked to Susan in years. Why was she reaching out now? And what did she mean by "it's about the baby"? I showed the text to Mark, and he was just as confused as I was. We decided I should call her back to see what was going on. When I called, Susan answered right away. She sounded panicked. She said, "I know this sounds crazy, but I think the baby you're carrying is David's." I was stunned. I couldn't even process what she was saying. "What, Susan? That's impossible. I haven't seen David in years." She explained that she'd seen a picture of me on social media. Apparently, a distant relative had tagged me in a photo where I was clearly pregnant. She'd done some digging, which honestly felt like stalking, and decided the timing could line up. She was convinced I'd secretly gotten back together with David and that this baby was his. I tried to stay calm and explain that she was completely wrong. I told her about Mark, how long we'd been together, and that there was no way David was involved. But she wouldn't listen. She kept insisting I was lying and that I needed to come clean for the baby's sake. The conversation ended with her threatening to show up at the hospital when I went into labor. I hung up feeling completely shaken and confused. I told Mark everything, and he was livid. He couldn't believe Susan would accuse me of something so ridiculous. He wanted to call her and give her a piece of his mind, but I talked him out of it. I didn't want to make things worse. We decided to ignore her and hope she'd eventually realize how crazy she was being. We figured she was just desperate for her son to have a child and was grasping at straws. Then, 2 weeks ago, I went into labor. It was long and tough, but finally, our beautiful daughter Lily was born. Mark was by my side the whole time, and he was incredible. We were in the recovery room, exhausted but overjoyed, when we heard a commotion outside the door. Suddenly, Susan burst into the room, with a confused security guard trailing behind her. She started yelling, "That's my grandchild. I know it. OP, you need to tell the truth. You've been lying to everyone." It was an absolute disaster. I was still healing from giving birth, my hormones were all over the place, and I felt completely humiliated. Mark stepped in and told Susan to leave, but she wouldn't budge. It took 2 security guards to finally get her out of the room. The whole thing was so upsetting, and I was beyond angry with Susan. After we got home from the hospital, I decided to call David. We hadn't talked in years, but I felt like I needed to set the record straight and let him know what his mom had done. He picked up, sounding shocked to hear from me. I explained everything, and he was horrified. He kept apologizing for his mom's actions and told me he'd been dating someone new named Serene. Serene and I have similar names, not exactly the same, but close, like if my name was Serena and hers was Serene. David had been keeping Serene a secret from his mom because he knew how obsessed Susan was with him getting remarried and having kids. He didn't want to deal with her constant pressure. Apparently, about a month ago, Susan overheard David talking to Serene on the phone but misheard the name, thinking he said my name. She immediately assumed David and I had gotten back together. David, admitting he was being a coward, his words, not mine, didn't correct her. He thought it was easier to let her believe what she wanted rather than deal with her reaction to his new relationship. He even told her I wanted to keep things quiet, which is why she hadn't heard from me. Then, on the day I went into labor, Susan's sister happened to be at the same hospital for a routine appointment. She'd only met me a couple of times years ago, but she knew how obsessed Susan was with David and me. When she saw me very pregnant and being rushed to labor and delivery, she called Susan right away. That's how Susan ended up in my hospital room, convinced I was carrying her grandchild. David apologized over and over, calling himself an idiot for not telling his mom the truth sooner. He said he tried to talk to her, but she refused to believe him, thinking he was just covering for me. He also mentioned that he and Susan were moving to another state to be closer to Serene, so I wouldn't have to worry about her anymore. I told him I appreciated the apology, but what he and his mom had done was really hurtful. I made it clear I didn't want anything to do with either of them ever again. Mark was listening to the whole conversation, and he was furious. He couldn't believe how selfish and irresponsible David and Susan had been. Hearing it all out loud confirmed that I wasn't overreacting, but it didn't fix the bigger issue, Carol. Mark had told his parents about what happened at the hospital. John, his dad, was shocked and couldn't believe Susan would do something so crazy. But Carol, Mark's mom, was oddly quiet. She didn't defend Susan, but she didn't criticize her either. All she said was, "Well, it's certainly a complicated situation." A few days later, Carol came over to visit. She brought a gift for Lily, a really expensive baby blanket that wasn't my style at all. She held Lily for a bit, fussing over her, but then she got straight to the point. She said, "Mark, I've been thinking about this whole situation, and I think, for everyone's peace of mind, you should get a paternity test." I was completely shocked. I couldn't believe she was actually suggesting that. Mark looked at me, his face a mix of anger and guilt. He said, "Mom, I'm not doing that. I trust OP completely. This is ridiculous." But Carol didn't let it go. She said, "It's not about trust, Mark. It's about being responsible. You need to know for sure. What if Susan is right? What if this baby is David's?" I finally spoke up and said, "Carol, I can promise you this baby is Mark's. I haven't been with anyone else since we got together. This is so insulting." She just stared at me coldly and said, "I'm just trying to protect my son. I'm sure you understand." Things only got worse from there. Mark ended up telling his mom that he wouldn't even consider a paternity test and that if she couldn't trust him and respect our relationship, she wasn't welcome in our lives. She left upset, and we haven't talked to her since. Mark has tried calling her a few times, but she won't answer. John, Mark's dad, has called him, and he's really upset about the whole mess. He's stuck in the middle and doesn't know what to do. So, Reddit, here's where I'm at. I'm a new mom trying to figure out this whole motherhood thing while also dealing with this crazy family drama. I'm hurt and angry that Carol would doubt my honesty and question whether Mark is Lily's father. I'm also worried about how this will affect Mark's relationship with his mom in the long run. I made it clear to Carol that if she keeps pushing for a DNA test, she can take a hike. I didn't say it exactly like that. I was more polite, but the message was firm. I told her that if she can't accept Lily as Mark's daughter without proof, then she doesn't need to be part of our lives. I want Mark to have a relationship with his mom, but I won't tolerate being disrespected like this. And I definitely don't want my daughter growing up around someone who questions who her father is. Any advice or suggestions would be really appreciated. What should I do? Update 1. Wow! I can't believe how much attention this post got. Thank you all so much for your kind words and advice. It's been such a relief to hear that I'm not overreacting and that Carol's behavior is way out of line. A lot of you suggested I talk to Mark about setting boundaries with his mom, and you were totally right. I'd been putting it off because I was just so tired and didn't want more drama, but it had to happen. So last night, after Lily was asleep, Mark and I had a serious conversation. I told him how hurt and disrespected I felt by Carol asking for a paternity test. I also shared my concerns about how this was affecting his relationship with his dad, John. Mark completely got it. He said he was really angry with his mom, not just about the paternity test thing, but about how she's been acting throughout my pregnancy. He admitted he's been making excuses for her for years, but now he's finally seeing her for who she really is. A controlling, manipulative person who cares more about her own image than his happiness. Mark tried calling her again, but she still wouldn't answer. He left her a voicemail saying he was disappointed in her and that he wouldn't talk to her again until she apologized to me and fully accepted Lily as his daughter. No questions asked. He also talked to John again, who's really upset about the whole situation. John loves Carol, but he knows she's in the wrong. He told Mark he's thinking about staying with us for a while to get some space from Carol and spend time with Lily. Mark and I agreed we'd be happy to have John stay with us. We've got a spare room, and Lily absolutely loves him. It'd be great to have his help, and it would give him a break from the toxic environment at home. A few of you asked about my parents and why they're not more involved. That's a fair question, and I should have explained it earlier. My parents live on the other side of the country, and they're both in their late 50s with some health issues. Traveling long distances is really hard for them, especially with everything going on these days. We video call them almost every day, and they adore Lily, even from afar. They've been super supportive of me and Mark, and they were really angry when I told them about Carol's behavior. They wish they could be here to help, but they just can't. They send their love and support, though, and that means so much to me. They even offered to help out financially if John needed a place to stay, which was really sweet of them. So that's where things are at right now. Carol's still ignoring us. John's thinking about moving in, and Mark and I are focusing on being the best parents we can be to our little girl. I'm done trying to please Carol or worry about her feelings. My family comes first, and that's what matters most. I'll keep you all posted if anything changes. Thanks again for all your support. It really means a lot. Update 2. So, things have gotten pretty intense. John came to stay with us a few days ago. He showed up with a small suitcase and this really downcast look on his face. He told us that Carol had barely talked to him since Mark's last phone call. She'd been cold and distant, and he just couldn't handle it anymore. The first day, he mostly just hung out with Lily, cuddling her and chatting with Mark. He seemed so relieved to be away from all the tension and negativity. He kept saying how much he loved Lily and how thankful he was to spend time with her. Then, yesterday, Carol showed up at our house out of nowhere. I was in the nursery feeding Lily when I heard the doorbell. Mark answered it, and I could hear Carol's voice, loud and angry. I walked out to the living room, and the vibe was super tense. Carol was standing in the doorway, looking furious. John was on the couch, looking completely drained, and Mark was standing between them with his arms crossed. Carol demanded that John come home right away. She said he was being ridiculous and embarrassing her. She even accused me of manipulating him and turning him against her. John tried to say something, but Carol wouldn't let him get a word in. She just kept yelling and throwing all these accusations at me. Finally, Mark had enough. He told Carol straight up that she needed to leave. He said she wasn't welcome in our house until she apologized to me and fully accepted Lily. Carol looked stunned. She's clearly not used to Mark standing up to her. She stumbled over her words for a second, then turned around and stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The whole situation was really stressful. I felt terrible for John. He looked so lost and kept apologizing to me, even though he hadn't done anything wrong. Mark and I reassured him that he was welcome to stay as long as he needed. We told him we loved him and were happy to have him here. After John went to bed, Mark and I talked. We both agreed that Carol's behavior was way out of line. We decided we needed to set even stronger boundaries. Mark texted Carol and told her we were cutting contact until she gets professional help for her controlling behavior and apologizes to both me and John. He said we still love her, but we can't let her keep disrespecting us and messing up our lives. It's been a couple of days now, and we haven't heard from her. I'm not sure what's going to happen next. Update 3. It's been about a week since Carol's big blow-up, and we haven't heard a word from her. No calls, texts, or emails. It's been completely quiet on her end. Meanwhile, John has been doing really well. He's been a huge help with Lily, and it's so sweet to see how much he enjoys being with her. He reads to her, sings to her, and takes her out for walks in the stroller. It's really touching. He's also started opening up more about his marriage. He told Mark and me that he's been unhappy for years. He said Carol has always been controlling, but it's gotten worse over time. He feels like he's lost himself in the relationship and has just been going through the motions. We encouraged him to see a therapist, and he's been going. He says it's helping him sort through his feelings and figure out what he wants for the future. He's not sure if he wants to stay married to Carol, even if she apologizes. He's finally thinking about what's best for him, which is a big step. Mark is fully behind his dad, no matter what he decides. He's just happy to see John standing up for himself. As for me, I'm trying to focus on Lily and creating a calm, loving home for our family. I'm still upset about how Carol acted, but I'm doing my best not to let it take over my life. I've been thinking about going back to work part-time. My maternity leave is almost up, and I miss using my skills. Mark is totally supportive, and John has even offered to help with childcare. We're also starting to plan Lily's first birthday party. It's going to be a small, cozy get-together with just close family and friends. Of course, Carol won't be invited. It feels weird to celebrate such a big moment without Mark's mom there, but I don't see another way. She made her choices, and now she has to deal with the results. I still hope that someday she'll realize she was wrong and apologize, but I'm not counting on it. Update 4. A few small but important things have happened. First, John decided to legally separate from Carol. He talked to a lawyer and felt it was the right move for now, saying he needed some official space between them. He told Carol about it, and, as expected, she didn't handle it well. She called Mark, yelling and crying, blaming him for turning John against her. Mark stayed calm and told her it was John's decision and she needed to respect it. Then, a few days later, we got a letter from Carol's lawyer. It was a cease and desist, basically telling us to stop spreading lies about her. She's claiming we've been telling people she's mentally unstable and a bad grandmother, which is totally untrue. The only person we've talked to about her is John's therapist, and that's private. We think she's just trying to scare us into backing off. Mark talked to his lawyer, who said we should ignore the letter because it's baseless and she has no real case. So that's where things stand. John is officially separated from Carol, and we're dealing with this pointless legal threat. It's definitely stressful, but we're sticking together and trying to stay strong. On a brighter note, Lily is doing amazing. She's growing so fast and has started babbling and smiling all the time. She's such a happy little baby, and she brings so much happiness to our lives.